due to technical difficulties, DIY with Papa Izzo has been preempted for... Next week, we will be returning to our favorite Papa Izzo and his DIY experiments. But for this week, I am still your moderator, Izzo. But please join me in welcoming my senior switch, Austin, our one and only student, Teddy, and our guest speaker, Nathan.
Record.
Okay.
We are recording now. Keep it PG-13.
I would hope it's PG-13.
Try at least.
How many
Alright, wait.
F-bombs do we get?
What?
No, Nathan.
Zero!
Thank
Nathan
Zero!
never swears.
This is
He is
DMU!
the Christian boy.
0 F-bombs. All right,
Okay.
Austin, I want you to introduce Nathan first, and then Nathan, I want you to take it away. Okay, buddy?
Okay,
All
sounds
right.
good.
This is Nathan. He is a graduate from CCS in Michigan, which is College for Creative Studies. And he has his bachelor's in, what was it specifically?
Fine arts.
So he's very good at doing art for video games. So like anything 3D that you would see in a video game, like, or even like movies, like anything animated like that is something that people like him do, and it's very involved with geometry.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So instead of saying this will never benefit me in my life, you can say this will never benefit me in my life if I don't intend to go into this very specific profession. But it's been very helpful for him, I guess,
Yeah.
considering all the stuff he has to do. So
Awesome. Nathan, take it away for us.
All right. There we go. Okay. So I don't know if you guys can see my screen now.
Ooh, very nice.
So obviously this is a geometry class, or for geometry stuff. For 3D modeling, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration, especially when you're doing like modular pieces, which is essentially creating one piece so you can stack it on top of, over and over and over again to make it quicker and more efficient to build stuff like buildings. With that being said, there are several different like calculations you have to make, like where the spacing is going to go for windows, what you're going to have for, empty space, all that kind of stuff. And in order to be able to snap these modular pieces together, you need to be able to know what the increments are for that piece to move, so that when you move it far enough up that it basically looks like it's all one piece. So if you don't get those measurements right, it obviously won't snap to where it's supposed to be, and you'll end up having gaps in between like that. There's several different things that I've worked on. In video games, it's not so much that it needs to be perfect as it is more of like industry stuff. So if I'm working with cars, or I had an internship with a place called Pixel Hut in West Bloomfield, Michigan, where they worked with Chrysler to develop cars and stuff and designs. And if you didn't have it pixel perfect, you'd have to restart the whole thing. So there's like a lot of stuff that goes into it.
That sounds like you need to be very accurate.
Yes. When it comes down to it, CAD most times are more of the geometry heavy, modeling and stuff, which I have dealt with. It's like when you go to start 3D printing stuff to actually use the mechanical parts and all that, if you don't have the right measurements, your machine's going to wear down faster, or it's not going to be able to work as well. But I mean, the same things can apply to, video game modeling and stuff too, especially with like modular building. Especially if you want to repeat something over a certain distance, well, you have, for a dock, for example, you'll have several different wood planks in a series. But instead of having to model each one of those wood planks separately, you can just make a couple of them and then duplicate them over a certain distance. But in order to do that, you need to know how thick the piece of wood is, you need to know how far you want them to go, and then you basically type in all those calculations into the computer, and then it duplicates those over a certain amount of time, or over a certain distance.
Wow. Can you show us how you would do something like that?
Yeah, I actually have another Blender file that I can show you that I was working on.
Is that expensive?
It's free.
Blender is free.
Blender's free online?
It is.
Awesome.
So I mean, basically what happens is you would just come in here and download whatever Blender is.
Okay.
In like Steam, I think is what I got it from.
Okay.
And yeah, anyone can use it as long as you have a Steam account. You don't have to spend any money on it, nothing like that. It's all outsourced stuff. So the community is really good with, helping others out, making sure like if they have any questions that it gets answered within the day, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's not technically industry standard as of yet. There are a lot of game studios who are starting to migrate over to Blender because it's free. And it's becoming more and more user-friendly than it was when it first started out. But for right now, industry standard is Maya, which is an Autodesk program, Mudbox, which is also Autodesk.
Expensive.
Yeah. And these programs are like a couple $1,000s for an annual subscription, so they're not cheap.
That sounds intense.
Right. And so when I'm doing like freelance work, I use Blender because that means that I don't have to spend a single penny, and I can still develop the same quality product that I would if I were using Maya. Although it might take a couple of steps extra, but it's definitely worth it.
Right.
So back to what I was saying with how these planks needed to be laid out. So I started out with one plank, and I mean obviously they're just little rectangles that sit on here.
Yeah. Nice little angular prisms.
Yeah, and so essentially what I do is I would take one of those and then I would calculate it into the system to say, okay, well, I want it to duplicate this many times, and I want them to have this small of a gap in between each one. So then it literally just kind of like calculates it, puts it out for me, and then I can go back in and do this kind of stuff where it makes it have a little more characteristic. So you can tell like each of these planks here aren't exactly the same, even though they were duplicated from one another. It's just so I can, it doesn't look perfect. So it has character. So when a player is playing through it, it's like, okay, this isn't pristine, so it obviously has some wear and tear, and it shows a little bit of story and all that kind of stuff as well. So
it seems more realistic then.
Exactly, yes. And so, I mean, when you want to build modular, let's see if I can just grab one of these instead of all 7 of them.
Why were they stacked on top of each other?
So they're stacked on top of each other. If you don't have them at world origin, which is this little, where the axes come together, if you don't export them at world origin, when you bring them into a game engine, what's going to happen is your cursor will be at world center in the game, but your object will be way out here. So your controller, so right now my controller here for this object is still on that corner point, but if I were to bring it into a game engine, that cursor would be here instead, but the object would still be floating way far away from the center. So it just makes it easier to handle. So like an over exaggerated thing would be like it's way up here but the cursor down here, and it makes it just really awkward and not really useful. So that's why it's all of them are stacked on top of each other.
Now, how does it not export them all as the same object? Because I've seen you do it in Unreal where it was like each one of them is a separate piece.
Yeah, so each one of these is a separate piece. So all of them you can see on the side here, I have my outliner, which tells me like which object is what. So I can select one of these guys and it'll only move that specific piece. It works the same way for exporting. So if I were to grab this, I could just go to File, Export, and then I would export just that singular selected piece. And then I can bring it into a game engine as an independent thing. The reason why I don't just start a whole entire new file is so that it doesn't get cluttered and it's easier to find all my pieces. So, I mean, they're all dock pieces and they're all part of a modular dock. So like I made each one of these pieces so when I export them, that it makes it really easy for me in a game engine to just kind of make a dock in any shape that I want. I have an end cap, I have a piece that goes into a intersection. I have, a piece that has, a stretch, so you can just keep copying them over and over and over again. For an example, it would be something like this, where I could just copy paste, and then I can move this over, and I can copy paste, and I can move this over. And then if I want, I can close it off with a cap. So copy paste, and now I have a pier. Really quick, really quickly.
Really fast.
Yeah, and it makes it really quick, makes it really iterative, and I can pretty much make a dock in any shape that you want me to with the modular stuff. So
Right, because you've got all the different types there. You could make a left turn or a right turn based on which of those, 5 pieces you've got there? 4 pieces?
yeah, there's like 5 or 6 pieces actually. So if I go back a little bit, yeah, it looks like I've got 5 pieces right now. It's not completely done yet because I still need to do a couple of like stair pieces and all that, but each one of these pieces is, it streamlines the, craft of whatever it is that you would want to consider I do.
The building process,
Yeah.
So you create one, and then you can augment that one based on the different types that you need. And then once you have a template of each one, you can copy and paste those in.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Because game design is essentially about finding the most efficient way to do everything. Because, do you have Unreal Engine open?
I don't, but I can open it.
So, what types of classes did you take at college?
So when I first started out there, I was doing a lot of basics. So it was, I'll just pull up this one and we can import those pieces. I have been making a lot of, basic stuff. So I would do sketching. So people would model for me and I would sketch them. We would do still lifes, and these were all hand-drawn stuff. And then we would go into a little bit more advanced. So this is where we would start to branch out and figure out what it is we exactly want to do. And then we would start getting into the more advanced classes where it comes into intro to Maya and modeling and intro to, lighting and texturing. And then it would be getting into, animation, character animation, just whatever. And then after that point, you get to your senior project where you get to basically, it's your senior thesis essentially is what it is. And you get to, at least in what I chose to do for my degree, was game design. And I got to create a little game level all by myself. And it basically just kind of zooms through a whole little diorama, if you will, of, basically what I learned at school and how I incorporated it into one piece.
Awesome.
What was also really cool about going to CCS was, and I don't think a lot of art schools that at least have a game design degree do this, but I was able to take a class, and this was over 2 semesters, where I basically worked with the entire class to make a game. So we were basically like a mini game development studio throughout the semester, so we could understand what goes into making a game, what the different positions mean, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was pretty neat. Let's see here.
So which program are we using now?
This is Unreal Game Engine. And so Unreal Game Engine is, typically when you use a game engine, it's a lot more coding driven. So a lot of the time you're going to have to, type in the physical code.
Okay.
With with Unreal, it streamlines it for people like me who are not as good at coding as others, and turns it into a node-based editor. So it has basically all that script typed out in a node, and then you can just connect those two together to create that code and execute what you want it to do, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I can go ahead and grab these, import them. We'll just hit import all.
Sorry,
so
I don't know
now-
if y'all heard that. There was like a truck that just went by my house playing country music at like to the volume where I could hear it making out
Right.
words.
Whoa,
Okay, so this
Yeah.
is massive, and
it's huge.
there's a couple reasons that you want to do that. One would be because if you were to shrink something as opposed to enlarging it, the quality gets worse.
Mm.
So I can just make it a little bit larger, and then I can scale it down to something this size. And basically I can do the same thing I was doing in Blender. Oh, I grabbed all of them on accident. I could do the same thing I was doing in Blender, where I can just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. And because I did all those calculations beforehand in the Unreal editor, it'll snap the same way that it snapped in the program.
Awesome.
So it's really imperative, especially if you're going to be working across multiple different programs, and that happens. I mean, it's inevitable. You can't get away from it. It's imperative that you get all of those calculations down and correct before you move into anything, because then you'll have some issues. You could have, pieces clipping, all that kind of stuff. So,
Wait, did you texture those?
no, these are not textured yet. This is just a default texture that Unreal gives you
Yeah.
to show that it's untextured. It's just like a
'cause it's-
checkerboard
Yeah,
pattern.
because it looked kind of brown from the.
It looks brown
Yeah.
because of the light,
Yeah,
Mm.
the atmosphere that he put in.
Yeah, but everything that you see in the scene, he made it,
Wow. Okay.
except for the car. I mean, all right. So what you're looking at, every single one of those trees is exactly the same.
Okay.
They're just rotated at different angles to give the illusion that it's a different tree.
That's okay. Did he make the trees, or is that like a
Well,
clip art?
Well, there's a program that you can use that basically can kind of make them for you. I think Nathan could explain it a little better.
yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to create pieces of work for video games. What people want to go for is being able to make that as quick as possible, so that when you're making a large scale game and it has production for 5-10 years, that they're not spending all of the money that they have making the game, so they can profit from it. So then you have people who come out with programs, like people with like Photoshop and stuff.
Okay.
Like you can use Photoshop to make your textures. That's what I do actually. And then there's other programs that streamline the process so that you don't have to do all the work.
I
So
like that. I like
in order-
that I have to do all the work.
yeah, right, exactly.
That's helpful.
Right. So if I were to model these trees back in Blender, it would take me several days. Whereas if I had a program called SpeedTree, I can have a tree done in 30 minutes with textures, UV, everything like that. What's also cool about it is once you develop a tree in SpeedTree, they have a randomizer, which means you just click a button and you have a brand new tree. Click a
Awesome.
button, you have a brand new tree. Click a button, you have a brand new tree. So it's just a program that's, it's in the name, SpeedTree. It's quick.
Yes. Yes.
So there's a lot of stuff that goes into making a video game. There's a lot of programs that you have to learn to be able to execute it. But that's not to say like you can't do it all in one program, because you can. It's just for the sake of time and quality that you learn other programs to your advantage.
And all of these programs cost, or?
So SpeedTree is, I think it's like $30 a month, if I remember correctly. So it's not too bad. It's about the same price as it would be for like Photoshop.
Okay.
The most expensive program that I have used was a CAD program, and it was called CATIA. And that program is like $91,000 a year.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah, it's expensive.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, thank God I wasn't paying for it.
Whoa, right?
Yeah. So that was when I was back working for Chrysler.
Right.
So,
Well, and it makes sense that powerful and lucrative company like a car company would be able to afford that, and oh, that's cool. Running.
yeah.
Oh, the end of the world.
Can run off.
Throughout the gaming process, our transformations are extremely important, like translation or dilation. In this case, we are dilating with the center of A, scale factor of 2. Or a reflection, or a rotation. These are our 4 transformations. We've talked a great deal about them. Now let's see if you can spot them. What's happening here? And here? What about this one? Last one.